Hello, this is Jeremy Webster with Collector's Maze, and I have the honor and privilege today to have one of the great monster kids done well of my generation-ish, Howard Berger of KNB EFX.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here, Jeremy.
How are you doing today on this Sunday? What's the weather?
Good. I'm all good, man. I start my days always super early. It's just, the last 40 years of being in the industry is I'm used to like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. calls, to go to set.
Yeah.
So if I wake up at 6, I'm like sleeping in. So it all worked out great.
So a lot of our viewers, younger viewers than me who may not have context, this man is an effects legend, basically. You got what, 200 credits to your name, an Academy Award for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Chronicles of Narnia, recent stuff, The Walking Dead, The Orville. Didn't you do most all of the Masters of Horror series on Showtime?
Yeah, we did all the Masters of Horror. Yep.
And goes all the way back to some movies that are legendary to me and my friends, which would be Day of the Dead, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, the great Sam Raimi splatter classics.
Yep.
What got you into effects work, into makeup work?
Well, I was lucky enough. I grew up in LA, in California, in Los Angeles, and my dad worked in the industry, not in makeup, but he was a post-production sound editor, and he loved movies, and we watched movies all the time. And I really gravitated to the horror stuff. I loved the monster stuff. And then, of course, when I saw Planet of the Apes, in 68, 69, that blew my mind. And I was like, okay, there must be somebody who makes all that stuff for movies. So, so my dad answered, these are makeup artists, and they do this and they do that. So, that really started to focus my imagination on monsters, and then introduced to the classic monsters, the Universal monsters, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon being my all-time favorite. And then I discovered the Toho movies, and Godzilla was just he still is like one of my all-time favorites. So is the Creature. I love both those characters. But
I see Creature every time it shows locally.
It's a great movie.
It's such a great film. Yeah, everything about it.
It is. It's excellent. It's still like the best Creature suit, I think. It's like it's never been done better. So it's pretty
my favorite scenes in that movie, he's in the cage, and they've got the mechanisms working for the gills.
That
blows my mind, because it could just be a suit, but they've actually gone to the extra effort to make the gills move in 1950 early 50s, wasn't it?
It's pretty amazing. Yeah, just those gills moving. Or there's that close-up when he's walking towards Julie Adams, and he just goes right into the camera, and those gills are just. Now, have you seen it in 3D? Have you ever seen the film in 3D? Yeah, okay, me too.
We had a was it stereophonics, that they call it? Not stereophonic, that's a stereo term, but they had the red blue lenses
at
the local theater several years back, and that was a trip.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool how it's all orchestrated, So yeah, it's a great film. I love it. It all started with that, and then I just started to teach myself how to sculpt and paint and draw and do some makeups. And I have 3 younger sisters, and they were all my subjects, all my victims.
Yeah.
So I would do makeups on them all the time, and it was great fun. I just tried to learn all I could. And back then there weren't schools, obviously there wasn't the internet. So I would try to find magazines like Famous Monsters of Filmland was a good one. And then Fangoria came out, and that was a big one for me too. So it was, really a fun time. And that was in the 70s, into the 80s. And when I went to high school, the drama teacher saw my portfolio. I showed it to him on my day 1, and I was in drama 1, which was like the lowest level you can be in. That's just like learning whatever. And he looked at my book and said, okay, you're going to be in play production starting tomorrow. And so I went from, back then, that's 9th grade is when you started high school. So I went from being in the 9th grade day 1 to being in the 12th grade class the next day. And because I had a book filled with stuff. Masks and makeups, and they're probably pretty crap, but nonetheless, here's this kid who's, 14 years old making monsters or whatever. And So it was
The whole
cool.
thing of they don't have to tell you to do it. You have the creative inkling to do it.
Absolutely. Well, it's like anything. I mean, just being proactive and having a keen interest, and back then I didn't really have any distractions. There weren't iPhones, there wasn't the internet where you're like, I'm just going to sit here and take a look through Instagram for 5 minutes, and then you realize you've been sitting there for 2 hours,
2 hours.
thumbing through whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was all about doing art and monsters on the brain. That's all it was.
Well, like it's reminiscent of the kid from The Shining, or not The Shining, Salem's Lot.
Salem's Lot, yes.
Yeah, and you have the kid, and he has the Aurora model kits, all these.
Yeah.
Of course, your ending turned out far happier than his.
Yes. That's true. That's true. But yeah, I mean, I was totally into all the Aurora models. They were magical to me, and it's funny to see them now because they're actually kind of small, but when you're a kid, they were huge to me. I thought they were like this big, and it's like, wow, the creature, look how big this is, and when you put them together and you're painting them, the best part is when you get to put the red tester's paint on them as blood, and you just cover the things with blood, and that was the best part.
Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of an interesting context wise now, because a lot of people now, we sort of have a glut of NECA. Nika's out there making figures, and there's a constant influx of these sort of monster products. At the time, like when I was growing up, that stuff didn't really exist so much. It was the model kits, or there was I remember some kind of Star Wars figure-esque series of Universal monsters. But that kind of stuff was like very special and prized to us because there wasn't really anything like it. Now you can go on the internet and find 37 Karloff Frankensteins licensed by whoever, but that was a real thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, to save my money as a kid and, run over to Kmart and buy the Wolfman toy that I saw there. And, I spent, mowed a lot of lawns and got it. And I mean, that was a big thing. It took a lot of effort. Like, okay, or even materials like, a gallon of latex was like, $15. And to me, that was, just unachievable. And that was probably a month worth of mowing lawns to get 1 gallon of latex so that I could make masks as a kid. So it was good. And, my folks were really encouraging. They supported me in it. They didn't like go and buy me things. They'd let me do that on my own because they knew that it would mean way more to me if I did that. But, like for Christmas, I'd get a gallon of latex, or I'd get a 100-pound bag of plaster. So, things like that, which are, of course, bizarre holiday gifts, be it Hanukkah or Christmas. But, it's like, I got you a 100-pound bag of plaster. I'm like, thank you. Oh, this is the best ever. So there were things like that really helped me through, growing up.
So one of your earliest credit shows is A Day of the Dead, the Romero zombie.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I started off right out of high school. So I graduated high school and I got a job. I worked at John Beekler's, who did all the Charlie Band movies. And actually my very first professional thing was Ghoulies, the first Ghoulies movie. And I worked on that. But really the big show for me was, to go on location was Day of the Dead. And I think I was like 18 or 19 years old, probably 19 years old. And I'd never been on location. It was kind of my college. And that's where I got to meet, my KNB business partner, Greg Nicotero, who of course has become my best friend for the last almost 40 years. And met Tom Savini and Johnny Volich and all these guys. And I got to be, live in the world of George Romero's zombie world for, 4 months. And it was great. I learned so much, but yet it was so much fun. That was really it. That's where I realized you can, and I was lucky early on, realize that it's important to have fun, because there's a lot of people that do what I do and they're great. And, but sometimes it doesn't seem like they have a lot of fun. They're so focused and fixated, but I love to laugh and I love to play and goof off. So, when it's time to work, I'll work, but I also like to run around. And so Tom Savini's the king of goofing off. So he would encourage us to goof off. So he had a reason to do it. And we did a lot of things that were, looking back are pretty dangerous. Some of us got hurt, but sure, it sure was fun. And Savini's a really fun guy. So.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I think there's a link in between creativity and fun. If you take the fun out, some of the creativity you need to make something like that sparkle goes away.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you're so intense about it, it's just, I don't know, eventually it just becomes a drudge, but whenever I start a show and I'm running the show, I'm department heading the show, I gather my crew on the first day and I said, okay, listen, this is a big task. It's going to run for, 7-8 months, but it's really important to have fun. Fun is the priority. I said, we all know how to do our jobs. We're great at our jobs. So we got that covered, but we're all going to have a good time doing this and no one's going to get stressed out. It's all going to be fine. And I said, the buck stops with me. So if there's any problems, since I'm in charge, it's on me. So don't worry about it. No one here is going to be in trouble. So it's great, but it's essential to have a good time.
I think it's always been neat to go back and watch, because you can find some like making of stuff on movies like Day of the Dead or some of the other movies, particularly with Savini. He was so, in the video you always see, it's amazing sort of the way he mentored like Nicotero and you, and you just sort of, picked up the ball and ran. Yeah. And you guys sort of come full circle to each other every so often. Like, for example, Greg Nicotero had Tom Savini in the season, I think it was the season finale, season 1 of Creepshow, and gave him a meaty part in that. And it's always great to watch those dots reconnect with you guys.
Yeah, no, it is. It's true. And Greg, I had Tom direct, I think, one of the episodes, in season 1. So that was really cool. And it is, Greg started with Tom, he was Tom's assistant on Day of the Dead and, got a part in it, played, Sven B. Johnson and his famous role in the movie. And, but, we all started and Tom really was the one that was the catalyst for all of us getting together. I'd already known John Vulich, and John went on to open up Optic Nerve with Everett Burrell, but Everett and I were roommates, and we had the apartment above John Vulich and another guy, Mitch Devane, who's an amazing artist. And so Johnny got hired to go work on Day of the Dead, and they ended up needing 2 more people, and they hired Everett and I, and that's how that all came about. We wouldn't have been on the show if it wasn't for Johnny. So Everett and I flew to Pittsburgh, did the show, and right out of the gate, I met Greg, and I knew I was going to be, best friends with Greg. And and we all stayed, stayed friends forever and ever. And we're still great friends. I talk to Savini, probably every couple of weeks. So, because it's just fun to talk to Tom.
How's he doing these days since the accident he had? Is he?
Oh, he's fine. He's fine. Listen, that guy's made of steel. So, Tom anything can happen. He's going to be fine. So, if anything, like that night, he sent me photos of him from the hospital, all bloody, and I was like, what the hell? He's like, yeah, look at this, and look at this, and look at this. I was like, Tom, stop, just relax, but he's great. He's funny as hell. He has a great life. He married a wonderful woman named Jody from Australia. He's got a great daughter, Leah, and she has 2 sons who he adores. And Tom's got a perfect life. He lives in the house he was born in, and it's a great house. He's never moved out of that house, and he owns like a good portion of that surrounding area. Bought a bunch of the homes, but that house was probably paid off in the 1800s, so, so he's okay. But Tom is a great guy. He's one of my all-time favorite people, and I've been lucky. 6 years before starting KNB EFX, I worked for other people. I worked for Kevin Yeager and Mark Shostrom and Stan Winston and Rick Baker and Makeup Effects Lab and John Beekler, and it was really great. That's where I learned a lot of my skills as an artist, but also as a person, and as somebody who's going to end up owning a effects studio, with Greg Nicotero and Robert Kurtzman. So, it was a giant learning adventure for me, and I still play upon all those things I learned, what to do and what not to do. And I always think like how would Stan Winston handle this situation, or how would Rick Baker do this, or they're good leaping off points, and remembering the lessons that they taught you. Whenever I hire somebody new, I give them the same speech that Stan Winston gave me when I was 18 years old, which he said, be on time. We started 8 o'clock, not 8:01, not 8:02, 8 o'clock. I'm here, you're here. And I used to show up in the parking lot at 7 a.m. because there was no way I was ever going to be late. And I would always beat Stan there. So Stan would pull up and see me sitting there waiting, and he'd open the door, and then I'd go in. And it wasn't because I was, trying to gain points. It was that I just did not want to be late. There was no way I would ever be late to Stan's. He made it such a point of being on time, and he was right. And I'm very time sensitive and really pay attention to it. When people come in late to the shop, I get really annoyed very quickly. Or if they come late into the trailer, I'm like, I'm here, you're here.
I very much share that trait. I don't believe in late.
Not at all. If you're on time, you're late. So there you go.
But I showed up to this 5 minutes early. Usually I do to set up,
No, I'm always early. Always.
Winston is such a pleasure to go back and watch him, because he created such large, illusions in his day. Yet he's such when you see clips and stuff of him, he's such like a quiet spoken man. But from what I've,
No, absolutely. Yeah.
You were on a different position. You were
I was on the other end.
But one thing that's always caught me is there was a big 2-disc release of Carpenter's The Thing that had an hour and a half, 2-hour documentary on it, and on the making of it, and they pulled him in there for a little bit because he did the big tentacle dog puppet,
right? Yeah.
Because Bottin was in the hospital. I think he worked himself to the point, if I remember it right, that he ended up getting sick. And they bring Winston in, and he says in there like a couple times, "This is not my deal. This is Rob Bottin's deal, and I just happened to step in when they just needed some back." And that was, so classy. You know what I mean? Like I came and I did a thing, and downplayed his own for what is such an iconic puppet in that movie, and not to put down anything else in that movie. That movie is amazing.
Right. It is.
But he was just like, and it's just like, wow, and it's not like loud. Yeah. he's
yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about Stan really, I mean, he was just always so great, and working for him was such an honor. It was such a great experience. I mean, when I worked at Stan's, I worked on Aliens, Invaders from Mars, Predator, Pumpkinhead, and Monster Squad. Those are the things I worked on when I worked at Stan Winston's. And I was just this kid, really. It's still a teenager, and it was just spectacular on every level. And I think the last time I worked for Stan was in 1985. And it was just amazing. And he was the kindest, warmest, sensitive person. But yet Stan could be very strong-willed, and really he elevated, in my opinion, Stan elevated our industry. It went from guys working in their shops, their garages or what have you. And then Stan was like, got a studio, and then made it bigger, and then made it super fancy, and made it, displays. And he really was kind of the Barnum and Bailey of makeup effects. He was a great promoter of what we did, and he wouldn't let anything slide. I mean, I think if Stan wasn't such a strong personality, there wouldn't really be a lot of practical dinosaurs in the first Jurassic Park. I think Stan really, really pushed that envelope and pressured them into doing it, which was the right thing to do. And now Stan's been gone for quite a while, and I see the new Jurassic Park films, and though there's stuff in it, I always think, like, if Stan was here, there's no way he would have allowed that. He would have like, nope, these are puppets. We're building puppets, end of discussion. And fill in the blanks. But Stan really was a hell of an innovator. And at the end of every show that I worked there, Stan would always say, "Did you have fun? Did you have fun?" And that's kind of where I learned. And I said, "I had the best time ever, Stan. Thank you." And I would get to go to set. Like, I got to go to set for reshoots that were in LA for Predator for a couple of weeks. And I wasn't part of I helped build it in the shop with, the lifers like Shane Mahan and Steve Wang and Matt Rose and Shannon Shea and Grant Arndt and Bob Kurtzman. We were all on the crew building it, but only a few people got to go to set, but when they came back and they had reshoots, Bob and I got added to the group, which was really great. And then got to go to set for Pumpkinhead and Invaders from Mars. And so it was really a great educational period. And I've always been friends with Stan's son, Matt, who to me embodies Stan. So whenever I see Matty, I feel like I still get to spend time with Stan because he's very similar to Stan. He has the warm and generous heart that Stan Winston always had. And I mean, I remember my very first week of working at Stan's, and like there was a mess up on my paycheck, which was probably like $400. And Stan came to me and was like, hey, listen, payroll messed up your check. Let me write you a check. And I was like, Stan, I'm cool. I'll just wait till next week. He's like, no, it's my responsibility. I said, it's all right. It's all good. It was things like that. He made it very personal, to when you worked for him. You were part of the family. He was very much a father figure for all of us. So, I miss him every single day, but I always think about, when I'm in situations, how would Stan approach this? Because he really was fantastic on all levels.
For the for the viewers at home, go see Pumpkinhead. It's weirdly underseen now. So is Invaders from Mars, but I actually had a chance at a convention I was at 10 years ago. I pulled a joke on Lance Henriksen. He was behind me in lunch line at a hotel restaurant, and nobody was serving us, because you guys get people day in, day out bugging you throughout conventions all the time. It's not bugging, don't get me wrong.
No, it's not bugging.
But the quiet 10 minutes are a thing, right? And it was a convention somewhere. George Romero was there, Tom was there, Lance Henriksen was there, and my wife and I were just standing in line for the restaurant, and Lance Henriksen's behind me, and I'm not bothering him. I'm not even pretending to notice him because he's got his 10 minutes of quiet, right? And we end up standing there half an hour, and no one's letting anybody in. It's like the restaurant actually isn't open. And I hear him behind me say, I wonder if this place is open. And I turned and I looked at him deadpan, and I said, I heard they only serve humans here. And his eyes just went. And then we talked about Pumpkinhead for half an hour. Times.
Yeah, Lance is a very nice guy.
Yeah. So that's my silly little con story.
Yes. Oh, that's good.
Lance Henriksen. So
yes, he's a good man.
KNB, how did KNB come into being?
Well, I mean, it was, Bob, Greg, and myself were roommates, and we worked together on a lot of things, and we were working, they were working for Mark Shostrom. They were working on Deep Star 6 and Phantasm 2 at the time, and I was working for Kevin Yeager, and I was on I just finished Child's Play, and I was on Nightmare 4 doing Freddy's makeup for Kevin. And I think we all met for dinner one night, and we said, we're kind of supervising shows, and there's a lot of responsibility on us, but we're not making any money. We're not getting any of the recognition. Why don't we take a chance and stop working for other people and start our own company? It just so happened at the same time, Scott Spiegel, who was co-writer of Evil Dead 2, called us and said, hey, I'm going to do this short little movie, or this little cheap movie called Intruder or Night Crew. And can you recommend some young effects guys? And Greg and I were like, yeah, us. So we agreed to do it. Then we said, but what we want to do is we want to start our own effects company. So, we don't care about the money. And because I think we got like $700 or something like that. And we said, but we want a front card that says special makeup effects by Kurtzman, Nicotero, Berger, EFX Group. Scotty's like, of course, so we did the effects and we got the credit. And then that just started. We started with a very small shop, like 800 square foot. It was like a bowling alley. And then just kept upgrading and upgrading as things started to get busy and our name started to spread. And, now KNB is a 20,000 square foot facility with 2 10,000 square foot storage units across the street. And it's pretty massive, and we're working all the time. And it's been, next year, it'll be 35 years that we've had KNB. So
35 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. I never anticipated. I mean, people thought when we started the company, oh, those guys will be out of business. Like, how can 3 partners run a show or run a shop? And it worked out great. And then Bob left, I want to say like 17, 18 years ago. And then it was just Greg and I, and it's been great. It's a great partnership. We work hand in hand. I mean, what's great is that Greg has his interests and I have my interests. And that way it doesn't seem to ever conflict. Like, I'm not like, no, I want to do all the zombie stuff, you know. But Greg loves zombies. He's rooted in zombies, being from Pittsburgh and a Romero fan and a Savini fan. And so, you know, his involvement on the Walking Dead series is instrumental to the show, but also it's right up his alley, where I like zombies, but I'm not crazy about them. I mean, I'm not like frothing, like, oh, I gotta do some zombie stuff. I prefer character makeups and more fantasy stuff and more, you know, other things, other aspects. And so it works out perfect. And that's also how we're able to run the gambit of doing a lot of different things and diversify at the shop, you know, on top of not just making monsters, but we do it, you know, specialty costumes and props and this and then we do everything. There's not anything we shy away from.
That is an interesting thing about when you look at the two of you, is he's always very, very on his horror, the zombies, this, and you've got Quentin Tarantino, you know.
Yeah, well, we both share Quentin. Yeah, we both share Quentin. So it's not. Greg had the last. I mean, I was on set for Pulp and Dusk Till Dawn, of course, and Kill Bill. Those are the ones I ran, and Greg has been very hands-on. And the two of us have known Quentin forever and ever and ever, before he was famous even, and that's how the whole relationship started. But yeah, no, it's like, yeah, it's just different things that we are drawn to, you know, which is great. If we like the same things, that could be boring, you know. If, you know, I'm like, well, I want to do Fear of the Walking Dead, and you go do Walking Dead, you know, I'm like, yeah, I'm good, dude, you run the whole thing. And he does. Greg runs all of it, and he's great at it. And, you know, now being an executive producer and a director, and, you know, and then creating Creepshow, which is all him. It's cool, you know. I think it's a childhood dream come true for him.
One of the neat things to read, for me to read and to watch, is the evolution of KNB over the years. Like, started as these guys that were very, you know, the monster kid scene, the horror scene, the Romero scene, Sam Raimi's early horror stuff, and then you sort of diversified out, like, into, for example, The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe, the fantasy elements, the puppeteering, and things like that. And, you know, the 90s wasn't exactly, and anyway, most people would say that are really diehard horror people, is like the 90s weren't exactly the best time for horror. So it's kind of an interesting element to see how you guys sort of reach that point and diversify into other things, because, you know, some people would just fall off the map completely. So sort of, was that like you said, you have a lot of fantasy inspiration. Is that sort of where you kind of got that?
Well, I mean, I think I love monsters. Trust me, I'm obsessed with monsters. I'm always buying monster t-shirts, and, you know, like, oh, look at this, and oh my God, we went to Universal Studios last week, and I'm like, look at all these monster toys. You know? I found a store in Pasadena here called the Dinosaur Farm. I was just out there doing something, and I saw it, and I stopped, and I went in, and I bought like a couple $100 worth of dinosaur toys for my office. So I'm like, it never ceases to, like, I'm always excited about everything. But I think what it was is, you know, obviously makeup effects were all about horror movies. You know, it wasn't like Meryl Streep was going to need makeup effects, you know, at that point. But then as things started to evolve, you know, we started to get called for other things. And I think our big break, though not a very good movie, is a movie called Gross Anatomy, which was a Disney movie, you know, like Touchstone Pictures or whatever, starred Matthew Modine and Daphne Zanuga, and they played these pre-med students. And, you know, Bob and I went and we interviewed to make all these cadavers, you know, these hero cadavers that can be dissected on camera, and da-da-da-da-da. So we put our bid in, which was like ridiculously cheap, but to us, it was a lot of money. You know, it was probably like under $100,000. And this is in 1989. And so we do this movie, and it all goes great. And then out of the blue, we get a phone call from Kevin Costner, and he says, hey, I saw this movie, Gross Anatomy, that you guys did. I saw all the cadavers, and they look great. I figure if you can do human cadavers, you can do dead buffalo, because I'm doing this movie called Dances with Wolves, and would you guys be interested? And Bob and I went and met Kevin, and of course we said we could do it. We had no clue at all how to do this. We've never done anything that big, and there was something like 16 dead buffalo and then 3 mechanical buffaloes and a wheelbarrow upper torso buffalo. So it was a whole bunch of things, and we just bullshitted our way through it and said, oh yeah, we can do that. And our shop was so small, we could only build 2 buffaloes at a time. So we ended up renting storage units. And once we finished one buffalo, we take it to the storage unit. And luckily, Greg had this big convertible El Dorado. So we could put the top down and we put the buffaloes in there and drive them down the street. So one day we got pulled over by the police because they wanted to know why we had dead buffaloes in the back of the car in a Cadillac El Dorado. Of course, that made no sense when they really thought about it. And we explained it and we were fine. But, you know, it was about being resourceful. So that started us then doing other things. And our name started to spread outside of the horror genre. And of course, I mean, you know, we started a relationship with John Carpenter, Wes Craven, Toby Hooper, John McNaughton, you know, I mean, you know, Joe Dante, all the horror greats, and Mick Garris, you know. And then when Mick brought us onto Masters of Horror, I went up to Vancouver for the 2 seasons and I did that. And I got to work with all those guys again, and some new guys, you know, like Lucky McKee and so forth. And it was really, 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 really great. But I mean, I really miss working with those guys. You know, obviously Toby Hooper passing was heartbreaking, and same with Wes. And you know, John Carpenter isn't really doing a lot of movie directing anymore, I don't think. And Greg handled a lot of the stuff for John. But yeah, no, it's, you know, it was great. But we started to realize, like, these guys, we were able to rely on them. Like, every year they're going to make a movie. Right. So we know we'll be working with them every year. But then as their careers started to slow down, and they started to slow down as they were getting older, we realized that we needed to diversify and start meeting other directors and not be able to rely on all the directors we worked with during the 80s and 90s. And that's where we started to spread our wings and work for other people and try to figure it out. And then, you know, I was lucky enough. I struck up a great relationship with Richard Taylor, you know, who owns Weta Workshop in New Zealand. And I met him on Hercules and Xena. And because we were hired by Rob Tappert, who's Sam Raimi's producer, and we were brought onto that show. And obviously it was shooting in New Zealand. And that's where I met Richard. And I was like the first makeup artist that Richard ever met. He didn't really, you know, living in New Zealand where there's like was less than 1 million people back then. He was the only person on the island that did it. And so we became fast friends, and things developed and Lord of the Rings and And so he was supposed to do Narnia, and he ended up having to drop out of the makeup effects and all the creature stuff because Kong had gotten greenlit. King Kong had gotten greenlit. So Rich said, listen, I recommend my friend Howard Berger. You guys should meet him. So I went in and interviewed with director Andrew Adamson, and it took a long time. Like, they didn't make a decision for like 6 months. It just kept going and going. And I was like, God, I sure hope I get this job. And I know, of course, they were talking to Stan and Kevin Yeager and, you know, a couple other guys. And anyhow, I ended up landing the job, and it was a lifetime dream. I couldn't have been more excited because I was a fan of the books, and it's a magical universe. And Andrew Adamson was wonderful, and meeting him the first time, I was like, I got to really work with this guy. And that started that, you know. And Narnia, you know, I mean, sometimes people go, what's your favorite movie? But Narnia is my favorite film. I mean, working on it was a great experience, probably my most favorite experience. And I love the movie. I, you know, gained great lifetime friendships with people on that show. I was lucky to work with my cohort Tammy Lane, who also won the Oscar that year with me, and she was amazing. And she was just coming off of Lord of the Rings, because she went to New Zealand to work for Richard on Lord of the Rings, went for 15 months and stayed 5 years. And I said, well, I got to get you back, so I'm going to have to get a show in New Zealand. So I'm coming to New Zealand. And we started working back together again, because she started working for KNB when she was 21 years old. And so it's been, for her and I, it's been over 25 years working together. And she's magnificent and wonderful and brilliant. And she's my right and left hand. So, but yeah, Narnia was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And then the movie comes out. It's wonderful. I loved it. And then you get nominated for an Oscar, and that was not anything in the cards by any means. That was just gravy, and like I couldn't imagine that, because I grew up loving the Academy Awards, and it was mystical and magical, and you know, to get nominated was, I mean, I was head over heels. It was wonderful. So
I think there was a real victory, and you can correct me if my thinking is wrong on this, but I think there was a real victory for the genre type film when Peter Jackson took home the best picture for Return of the King, because and there was a sort of a rumble at the time, these movies don't take that award. It's going to go to something else, but it so opens the idea of creativity, because there's so many people who think that genre film, fantasy, horror, science fiction, whatever, are these little orbiting bodies, that they're cheaper things that you know sit out. But you know, if it's like me, for an example, as a reader, yeah, I could read or watch a movie about normal people doing normal things and in the tribulations of life, but it's so much more interesting to see something, the human experience is presented in this sort of larger than life, you know, outside scope. And I think that the art on that side, you know, watching it get that kind of respect, you know, the Narnia films and what Peter Jackson did with the Lord of the Rings was like really heartwarming in a way. If you look, like, for example, right now, in you and I both to some degree remember the 70s, and if you were into, say, like Dungeons and Dragons, or you read Tolkien or something, you were sort of codified off as a nerd or something. But you look like now, Dungeons and Dragons is everywhere.
Yeah,
like everywhere. And these things that we were so passionate about at that time have finally found their way into, you know, if not completely the mainstream, then definitely the culture footprint.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, the nerds always win. That's all there is to it. And that is a true 100% fact. And yeah, I mean, you know, listen, you know, when you're growing up and you're into movies and monsters, I mean, that's a weird thing, you know, when you're a little kid and people are looking at you kind of strange. And but yeah, I mean, you know, I was always into that stuff. I was always a monster kid, and but it's, I mean, I'll even go back a little bit from Lord of the Rings to Silence of the Lambs, you know, winning Best Picture.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that's a horror movie. That is a horror film. And it's a great horror film. And, you know, you have, basically that film swept the Oscars that year, you know, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best everything, Best Picture, you know. And even though they try to play it down like it's a thriller, I'm like, I'm sorry, if you're eating somebody, that's a horror movie. But yes, I think that Peter doing those movies, Peter Jackson doing those films, certainly gave the genre some legitimacy. A lot, actually. And now, I mean, we live in that world. I mean, look at all the there's a Marvel movie out like every 24 hours. And you know, and that, even though it's like Marvel Universe, I'm sorry, that's still all nerd stuff and geek, and it's nerdy geek stuff, and I love it. I think it's super fun. And you know, I have Superman and Batman on the brain all the time, and although I know those aren't Marvel Universe characters, but
that's a great character.
but you know, it's cool to see what's going on, you know, and people love it, and it's extremely mainstream. I mean, there's nothing more mainstream than fantasy, and superhero stuff's all fantasy stuff. It's all fantasy, sci-fi fantasy.
Fantasy.
Yeah, you know,
you occasionally run into the person who is the what the Marvel and the superhero films have done has been so bad for the art of the industry. And it's like, if you look back 50 years, Westerns were the equivalent of the Marvel movies. You know, it goes in it evolves in cycles. People like that epic sort of mythic archetype.
Well, I think as long as the movies maintain and you know, as intelligent as possible, and it be as entertaining. I mean, going to see a movie is about being entertained, you know, for the most part. You know, I mean, granted, if you you know, there's certain films that are more educational, that hope that, you know, you learn something from it, but for the most part, you check your worries at the door, pay your your fee to get in, buy your ticket, and then just sit back and enjoy the movie. That's what it's about. And the Marvel universe, though, sometimes I think I get a little fatigued sometimes by so many movies, superhero films, and now that DC is putting out stuff as well as Marvel, and so on and so forth. I get it, but yeah, you also have a choice not to go see it and go see something else.
Yeah.
And I mix it up. We go see different things. My wife and I go to the movies constantly, and now that theaters are back open, because that is the forum it should be seen in. And
Thank you.
we'll go see a bunch of stuff. I mean, we saw Black Widow one weekend, and then went and saw the Suicide Squad the next weekend, and then after that we went and saw the Anthony Bourdain documentary Roadrunner. So we really mix it up. But I love going to the movies. I think it's amazing. And it's, though we have gotten used to sitting at our home and watching movies and streaming and all this stuff, that's all fine and dandy, and you can pick and choose, and it is expensive to go to the movies, but you miss out on the most important thing, which is that communal experience, being in a room with people that are there for the same reason. And it adds so much to the experience of seeing a film that you don't get sitting in front of your television watching Netflix. So I strongly encourage people running to the theater in a safe fashion. Very safe.
I myself kind of felt, because we have some local screenings. We have a horror fest that goes on down here in Wichita every year. That's going to be at the drive-in again this year, at our little drive-in there. So we don't have, pandemic issues.
Sure, of course.
And an amazing thing, because as I told you earlier, I work on the internet. So when they shut everything down for the pandemic, I effectively became, not truly homebound, but, real close to that, because we can do our jobs from home.
Right.
And when I actually, a year and a half, whatever, after, went to a movie the first time, it was like a reconnection with the media in that experience.
Sure.
We kind of tend to take that for granted in a way. And I realized that the experience, because there's so much debate about, well, you can stream it and stuff. Yes, but the theater is its own experience.
Yeah, it is 100%.
And so I kind of realized we've taken this kind of for granted for the anyway, I had for the last 20 years. We have the theater, we can go, we can not go, whatever. But now it's a thing again. So
yeah, I think it's super important. I love it. I mean, I was raised on going to the movie theater, so I can hardly wait. Every weekend we plan, like, okay, we're gonna go see this movie and go see this movie. And, I mean, granted, I watch movies all week long, and we put in a big screen and projection TV thing here just because of that reason. But we'll watch films that aren't out anymore, or I always like to go back to my back catalog of films, because I know they're going to be great. So I'd rather spend 2 hours watching something that I might have seen 10 times, but I know it's fantastic, than watch something, spend 2.5 hours and just go, oof, that was hard to get through.
That's a weird thing. Yeah, I'll do the same thing. Or I'm to the point where I start looking at run times on movies. So what's the running time on that?
Well, it's true, because some movies nowadays they're too long. I'm sorry, no movie needs to be more than 2 hours. It's just too much. And especially in the world of fantasy and so forth, some of these Marvel films are like 2.5 hours, and I'm like, guys, come on, really? That's a lot to ask.
It's like the new adaptation of Dune coming out, which I'm pretty excited to see.
Me too. And
they made the decision to split it into two movies, and there were a lot of people that were annoyed about that. But it's such a dense work.
It is.
I mean, they probably made the right decision there, because it can be more Dune than. And I'm pulling for that movie. I'm pulling.
Me too. I mean, I started reading the book again. And I'm halfway through it. I think I just started the book 2, and it's arduous, man. It's really it's a lofty book, but it's great, and I'm really excited to see what's in the movie that was in the book. Hopefully there's more, and more faithful than the other version. But I mean, I'm excited about it. I didn't want to sit through a 4 or 5 hour version. I would probably kill myself. and then it would just not be great. But I think splitting it up is a great idea. I think that's going to be a great film. He's a great filmmaker, and it looks like a great cast. And of course, we know the source material is excellent. So,
am I correct in remembering that you worked on the 2000 sci-fi miniseries of Dune?
yeah, we did. Yeah, KNB did. We did work on it that John Harrison had directed, and we designed and built all the sandworms. We handled all the makeup effects. There was a whole bunch of stuff, and we'd been designing forever and ever and ever. Even designed all the still suits, and it was great because we knew John Harrison from the Romero days.
Yeah,
because John used to work with George all the time, and so John wrote and directed this and hired us. And Greg ended up going to set. He went to Prague to shoot the sandworm stuff, and but I supervised it in the shop and orchestrated all the design work, and it was great. It was really a good experience.
I remember that as being very loyal to the the books. It's kind of fallen off the radar of the universe.
Yeah,
I'm not exactly sure why. I've got a DVD of it somewhere, but I remember when it premiered on Sci-Fi, it was a huge deal.
Yeah,
and everyone was like, wow, they did Dune and they did it well.
Yeah, they did it well. Yeah. And then there's Children of Dune that followed after that had James McAvoy.
Yeah.
Even before we worked with him on Narnia. So nobody knew who James was at that point, really, just other than a magnificent actor. And I think we ended up doing stuff on that, but not like we did on Dune. We were in development with Dune for the longest time, like over a year. And I was lucky enough to have this artist named Joseph Hahn, who worked for us, and he was a great illustrator and designed all this beautiful stuff. Well, Joseph came to me one day and said, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna take a leave of absence from the shop because I'm gonna pursue music, and I have a band, and we just want to try it out." Blah blah blah. It turned out that was Linkin Park, and so Joe was the DJ of Linkin Park. So he left designing at KNB to pursue his career in music, which I think panned out pretty well. So, but I still have tons of Joe's artwork, and I'm like, yeah, this is Joseph Hahn's artwork. It's fantastic.
I just remember being blown away when I saw it. Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool. Yeah.
So what are you up to these days?
What am I up to these days? So I just finished season 3 of Orville. It was an 8-month job, and I was a department head on season 1, 2, and now 3. And getting to work with Seth MacFarlane is a fantastic experience. I had met Seth on TED 2. I was department head on that, and originally there wasn't much in TED 2 until he rewrote the ending, and it takes place at the San Diego Comic-Con. And I'm like, wait a minute, we can do a bunch of cool stuff. So I went to Seth with a list, and he's like, just do it all, I don't care. So I just came up with my wish list, like including a full Godzilla suit. And I'm like, can I just make all this stuff? And he's like, Howard, do whatever you want. And I'm like, oh my God. So it was the most fun. We shot that stuff. We shot the movie pretty much in Boston, but the last several weeks, including all the Comic-Con stuff, was done over at Fox Studios in LA, and tons and tons and tons of makeups. And so Orville came about, and Seth's producer, Jason Clark, had called me and said, hey, Seth's going to do this series, and it's kind of a Star Trek spoof. And are you interested? And I'm like 100% interested. So I ended up department heading and doing all the creature stuff. And it was nice to see how it all changed, because it was it's a comedy. And I think people were thinking, oh, this is going to be like Family Guy in space, but it wasn't. You know, and Jon Favreau directed the pilot, and the show's tone has changed through the seasons, and it's gotten more and more sci-fi. And because Seth loves sci-fi, he loves Star Trek. He's a super brilliant guy, super creative, and also very funny. So if things need to be funny, he's got it covered, and it needs to be technical, he's got it covered. So anyhow, I just finished that about a month ago. Yeah, about a month ago, I finished Orville. I'm just taking it easy right now, enjoying my downtime. I've been writing a book for the past 15 months, which will be out next September, which will be super cool. And I interviewed 70 makeup effects icons and directors and actors and so forth. And it's basically about the fun and adventures of what we do for a living. Tons of photos, tons of everything, and it's going to be great. And yeah, then, you know, I'm sure I'm going to have something come up. You know, I wanted to take the rest of the year off, but I think that's not going to happen. I'm sure there'll be a project that'll pop up, and then my wife will say, why did you tell me you were going to stay home the whole year and now you're going away somewhere? But I've been very lucky the last, you know, since 2019, staying in LA and working in LA, because I finished a movie in Boston in 2018 with Mark Wahlberg called Spencer Confidential, came back, and then I jumped on to Legion season 3. I'd done season 2 and season 3, and then went on to Space Jam, the new legacy, or a new legacy, and department headed that and did all the stuff in that, then did them for Amazon, and then went back to Orville. And then I was on to Orville for 1 week, and then we had the COVID shutdown, and so I was off, you know, for five months, but still working on stuff, still at home designing and building, and, you know, trying to get a head start, because I knew we were coming back and there was certainly enough work to be done. And then just finished Orville about a month ago, so it's good. So
even when it's not busy, it's busy.
Always busy. I was up this morning doing emails to producers and stuff for some design work for a show we're going to do next. So, but yeah, it's always busy. It's always busy and crazy. And Greg is in Atlanta working on Walking Dead, you know, the final season, and you know, juggling a whole bunch of other things. And the shop is super busy. You know, we've got a slew of movies we're working on and TV series we're working on, and we have about, I don't know, maybe 30 people employed at KNB now, which is great. So it's been keeping people busy, and yeah, it's good. It's all good.
When are you looking at do you have a date of any kind for the book release?
Yeah, it'll be out September 1st, 2022. So
oh, nice. A year from now.
Yeah, a year from now. So Wellback Publishing in London is publishing it, and I wrote it with a writing partner. His name is Marshall Julius, who's a writer, thank goodness, and he's on Instagram and all that stuff. He's Vintage Geek, and he's a great guy. He's a big geek and squid. We call him squids. So that was always our thing. Like, if you're a geek and a nerd, you're really a squid, and that means you're like, your tentacles are everywhere, and ink is you're so excited, like at a convention, and you're like, oh my god, look it over here, and like giant tentacles flapping around. So we just kept calling everybody squids, including ourselves.
Yeah,
you're like, dude, why are you squidding out right now? So Marshall is a great guy, and he's co-writing it with me. And yeah, I mean, it includes, you know, the book has got Rick Baker, it's got Kevin Yeager, it's got Christopher Tucker, who did Elephant Man. It's got John Landis. It's got James McAvoy. It's got Ben Foster and Doug Jones. And I mean, you know, we did it. Yeah, we started April of 2020, and in that time frame, did 70 interviews, about 2 hours each, about what we do and how it affects them. And, like, you know, when we talk to actors discussing, like, what's your relationship with makeup and how does it work, and, you know, with your makeup artist. And it's really interesting. Some really super fun stories. And Guillermo del Toro's writing the foreword, and Seth MacFarlane's writing the afterword for me. So it's going to be cool.
Oh man, what's the title?
It's going to be huge. Yeah, it's going to be like 400 pages and photos you've never seen before. So,
oh, it just sounds so awesome.
It's going to be awesome.
Do you have a title for it?
What's that?
Do you have a title for it?
Yeah, it's called Masters of Makeup Effects.
Masters of Makeup Effects.
Yeah. So,
because I'm going to put a note in there.
Yeah, put a note in there. It'll be out September 1st, 2022.
September 1st.
Yeah.
Well, anything you want to?
No, I mean, I appreciate this. Thank you. I always enjoy talking to people and putting it out there. And, no, it's just been, I just feel very grateful for the career that I've had. I mean, I'm heading into my 40th year doing this. It's been a lot of work. It's been a hell of a great adventure. You know, there's always ups and downs, but there is that way in everything. But the reward is that you get to do something that you grew up loving, you know. It's like, I dreamed of doing this, and I achieved the dream, you know, and it's been great. And I've worked with some of the greatest people on earth, and I've just learned tons and laughed and laughed a lot, and that's important. So, you know, they always say like laughing adds to your life, you know, and I think I'll probably be at least 1,000 years old. So, because I laugh nonstop. It's my most favorite thing to do is laugh.
Yeah.
So I love it.
I think there's a special thing there, because you came up and you did end up making the things that you loved, and then it became something even bigger than that. And it's a great thing to think about these days, particularly with you know, like cosplay sort of groups and all these little groups that are so into these visual arts, and they're doing it just sheerly for the art of it, you know. That there's a strong echo of that. While some of the cultural footprints have changed over time, you know, to anime was added, and some of these things, that it's all this sort of enthusiasm, and so it's just sort of brilliant to watch it become a thing the way it has.
It is. It's infectious. I mean, I get really excited. I'm blown away when I'm looking at stuff and see what people do with cosplay and how fantastic it is. I mean, it really, I mean, some massive work went into things, and I'm like, it sure come a long way from, you know, dressing up as like Princess Leia slave girl and to like these amazing, like full like armor, or like, you know, Iron Man 1 suit or whatever, you know, stomping around and so forth. It's some pretty cool stuff people are coming up with, or full Godzilla suits. And this is one guy that I met with and makes these fantastic Godzilla suits, and holy shit. I mean, they're just, I'm like, I would love to have that. I don't know what I do with it, but you know, I probably wear it.
Yeah. Well, it's good for business meetings.
Yeah, it's great.
Walk in with the Godzilla suit. No one argues with the guy in the Godzilla suit.
No, nobody messes with Godzilla. Not at all. Not at all.
Well, this has been Howard Berger. I thank you so much for sitting with me this morning, and
oh, thank you.
And we will look forward to the book. We'll throw a mention on it out there. And
sounds great.
And all right, well, I'm gonna drop some links to well, you got a lot of movies.
I have a lot of movies.
But I'm going to drop some links, and people can check out more. And you have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And you know, for everybody listening, just if you have a dream, just follow it, you know, and just be proactive and do it. Because if you want, my dad always said, if you want something bad enough, you can achieve it. And I wanted this bad enough, and I have achieved it. So, but you can do it. Anybody can do it.
Thank you much, and have a great day.
All right, you take care.